Hello and welcome to the Evercade Retreat. My name is Gene Joke and today I'm talking about Evercade's 2024 and giving my opinion on the year as a whole. I'm going to cover both hardware and software, obviously my views on them, and I'll start with the hardware because I didn't buy any of it. So my opinion's been nothing, but I'll give an overview of it. First of all, they announced the revised EXP and VS, the R consoles, and yeah, they're revised, they're perfectly fine. They didn't do anything new or revolutionary. Essentially they're just repackages with a bit of new colour. Now I know the EXP R does have some changes, none of them which would really affect me aside from the removal of the Capcom games. Now, I seem to have a Mutant EXP. I know a lot of people have had issues with their batteries and things like that on theirs. And mine, a year, 2 years on, something like 18 months old, whatever it is now, it's from when I got it. It still does 4 to 5 hours, probably about 4.5 hours on a full charge. No issues there, it's not been reduced, it still plays fine. The most I had with it is I had an unseated left trigger and I opened it up because it's out of warranty by then and reset that and it's been fine since. Other than that, it's been an absolutely solid device for me. There's a little bit of light bleed and the speakers aren't as good as they could be. It's perfectly functional for what I want and I like the way the controls, like the D-pad feels and the buttons. So I felt no need to get an EXPR. My VS is running absolutely fine and the VSR does nothing new, so absolutely no point for me. So when it came to it, I bought the Tomb Raider collection on its own, no need for those consoles. Then of course we've got the new Super Pockets, the Atari one and the Technos one, and I had no interest in the Technos one. I'm not a huge fan of the Technos games. I like some of them just fine, there are some very good ones, but I've got the carts and there was nothing new on them that on the Technos collection, or the Technos Super Pocket rather, that made me want to rush out and buy it. And I have the Taito Super Pocket, which I got mostly because it has Rastan Saga on it and a few like Bubble Bobble and a few games that I really wanted, which obviously are never going to come to cards, or at least not anytime soon. And I like the system, but I would rather play the EXP in general. So yeah, it's a nice little system, but not enough for me to go out and buy loads of them, which is why I haven't bought any of these. The Atari one, I was very tempted to buy the Wood Grain Limited Edition. Again, I'm not the biggest Atari game fan, but with 50 games on it, and there are some classics on there, and some ones I haven't played and aren't on the cartridge collections, that was tempting. I may pick up one of the standard Atari ones at some point. But again, I don't really feel any need. It's just, I could get it, maybe. It's only 50 quid, so it's not much to spend out if I do choose to. Then we have the Alpha, which I always thought would be quite interesting. When it was announced and we just had the name, one of my thoughts of what it might be was essentially I thought it might be an arcade stick console hybrid. Just like a console stick that you'd plug in, put your carts in, plug it into TV, have ports for others. And well, I was along the right lines of that. They're going something arcade based, which I think is really good. Is the Alpha for me? It'd be a bit of a novelty. I've been tempted by various arcade one-ups and similar cabinets, but the issue has been if I wanted a full-size one, where the hell am I going to put it? My place is quite small. I don't really have the room, but it'd be great. Or one of these smaller ones. It's always been, well, it's quite a lot to pay out for something that's only got 5 games in it or something, and they always seem quite cheap and nasty, a lot of them. And I'm not speaking for the whole, I've not spent much time playing them, when they've been on display in a store somewhere. But for the most part, the ones I had seen that I thought maybe I'd pay that for, they just seem cheap and nasty, but that is the really budget ones. So the Evercade Alpha was more appealing because of the whole Evercade thing, and having the entire cartridge library meant get more play out of it. But ultimately, it would be a novelty and a showpiece. So as yet, I haven't opted to buy one. I may do at some point when I'm feeling a bit more flush for cash. And we'll see. I know many people have said, their criticisms have been the lack of the HDMI out and the price. And the price doesn't bother me. If it's well built, which from the reviews it seems that is the case, that's fine. And the HDMI out, well, I would only use it for making videos, which yes, it would be a convenience, but it's not really essential. And with something like the Alpha, really, you'd probably want to show it off in the video anyway. So it's not a big issue for me. But again, everyone's views on what they want is different. From having seen other people's videos, I think the way the game sounded in it, the speakers, I really like that. It kind of does really remind me of the old arcade feel, being in the arcades back in the day. Some games definitely sound a lot better on the Alpha than they do through my TV speaker or even through my headphones. So there is that appeal. Like I say, I may get one at some point. But again, it's not a rush. It's not an important thing. It's an extra. It's certainly not a need. It's a partial want, a novelty want, I suppose. But I'm glad to see people liking it. It does look like a pretty decent piece of kit, and the interest in arcade games and things is always great. I was concerned that the future of the arcade line was quite limited if they didn't get the big arcade publisher licenses. Without your SNKs, Sega, Capcom, Konami, and Midway, things like that. Without those, there would only be so many more arcade carts they could do, maybe 5 at a push. So getting the SNK deal, I think that is huge news, because it does mean that the arcade line will be pretty stacked for a while, even if it's just SNK. And I'm sure we will see more of other ones. But again, we are kind of now leading away from hardware into software, so I might as well get on with the carts released in 2024. Now, I know some people have been disappointed with the cartridges that have come out this year, and I can see where they're coming from. A lot depends on your taste in games, and of course your particular brand of nostalgia. So in that respect, it's actually served me quite well. I think it's been a pretty good year. I wouldn't say every cart's been a banger, but I can safely say I have found something to enjoy on every collection that has been released this year. Starting right back at the beginning of the year, we had the release of Indie Heroes Collection 3 and the C64 Collection 3. I have done a full review or ranking of the Indie Heroes 3 games, so you can check out that video to see my opinion. But yeah, I thought it was a pretty decent collection. Donut Dodo was good fun, especially once they sorted out the loading times, and I was a huge fan of Choo Choo Mimic, and had fun with a number of the other games as well, but those were the two standout titles for me. Obviously Big to Small was good fun as well, but I do feel that if you weren't into puzzle games or your simple arcadey things, it was a bit more limited. I felt that Indie Heroes 2 was a stronger collection, and Indie Heroes 1 had more variety. In general, the C64 collections have been quite divisive. There are those who just have no nostalgia for it, can't get into the games because, well, they're not sort of tailor-made for consoles, they're not as pick up as Play and other things. They have a very distinct look. So I completely understand why many people would bounce off these collections. Personally, I had a C64 back in the day, I had a lot of fun with it, and I would say that C64 3 is probably the most accessible of the C64 collections. Well, the ones I've had so far. The highlights for me are probably Boulder Dash, Exelon, Paradroid, and Anarchy. And I had fun with a lot of the others as well. And, well, I say fun. Stormlord 2 I've experienced is probably the best way of putting it, and Cybernoid 2 I was keen to revisit. Unfortunately, there is a cheat baked into the version on the Evercade, and that kind of hampered my enjoyment because I ended up accidentally activating the level skip while I was trying to play through it, so I haven't touched it since. Maybe they'll patch it one day, but doesn't sound likely. After that, come April, was the release of Sunsoft Collection 2 and Picco Collection 4. I have done a review ranking video of Sunsoft Collection 2, so again you can find my thoughts on that, but I do think it's a very good collection, Euphoria being the highlight. But also was surprised at how much fun I had with Aero 2 and Zero the Kamikaze Squirrel, which I didn't really expect to. They turned out to be better than I thought, and other games were enjoyable as well, to varying degrees, but overall it's a solid collection. Now, I think the Picco collections get a bit of a bad rap. They aren't full of amazing games, but I like a lot of the obscurities. It's almost like a collection of games that you might have rented back in the day. Now, the big draw on this one was Lover being the first N64 game, and I think it runs fine. Yes, it does look a bit more pixelated than the N64 version because some of the, I'm not sure the correct term, like the smoothing or the sort of after effects have been removed, I suppose, to make it run more smoothly, but the gameplay is intact, and using an analog controller with the more recently added analog support definitely makes it a bit, definitely improves the controls on it. Is it a great game? Well, I don't know. I haven't finished it yet. I've probably played less than a quarter of it. Yeah, it seems fine. I'm not a huge 3D platformer fan, but yeah, it's fine. My personal highlights on the collection were Risky Woods and Skulljagger, or Skulljagger, however you want to pronounce it. Risky Woods is basically a bit of an arsehole of a game. I did play it back in the day a little bit, but only briefly on someone else's Amiga version I played, and yeah, I quite like the game, and beating it, working out the quirks of the mechanics and the items was interesting. But will I play through it again? I don't know. Target Renegade was a disappointment. I was a big fan of the Spectrum version back in the day, and this NES version is pretty terrible, although it does have some absolutely banging tunes. Bad Street Brawler lives up to its name. Street Racer is okay as a Mario Kart type game. There weren't many decent ones back in the day, and it's probably one of the better ones, but that's not saying much. I mean, it's not brilliant, but it's okay. Overall, it's not a great cart. There's not a huge amount of draw that makes you think, oh, I really want to play that game, unless you have nostalgia on them anyway. But yeah, it's fine. there's a reasonable collection, and there's some pretty decent sized games here if you want to get through them all. After that, there was the 3-month wait between the release of the Picco and Sunsoft collections and the release of Tomb Raider and Thalamus. Only they were delayed a month, so it became a 4-month wait. I think that did hurt Blade and Evercade as a whole because people were eagerly awaiting something, and of course the consoles were delayed as well. Wasn't great for that. The collections themselves, well, I played and enjoyed the Tomb Raider games back in the day. Well, 1 and 2. I didn't really play much of 3. And revisiting, well, so far I've only played through the first one. I absolutely loved going through it again, reminded of how good the game is. I have no problem with the graphics or the controls. It's something which time, again, nostalgia may play a part there, and getting used to the controls and how they work really for the gameplay. I really enjoyed it a lot more than, say, I enjoyed the Uncharted games or anything, because the simplified controls that make everything too easy takes part of the challenge and takes the sense of exploration out of it. And I'll get around to beating the other 2 games at some point. Now, Thalamus is one that I think many people thought might be a Commodore 64 collection that would interest or appease people who weren't into the others, and I don't think that's proved to be the case, perhaps even more divisive than some of the others. Now, I had played a bunch of these games back in the day. I was a big fan of Creatures, although I couldn't really get past the second level on it because it's a very tough game. But it had a lot of character, and the humour in it appealed to sort of 11-year-old me or whatever it was back when it came out. So I think for people like myself with nostalgia for it, it is a good collection. And even if you hadn't played these games but were familiar with the C64, you can have a lot of fun with the collection. But also there are some games which are definitely not so good, and they all take a bit of getting into. So if you like the home micro games, you'll probably like this collection. If not, you'll have a similar opinion to Ed from the Evercade Effect, who just really didn't like the collection. And that's understandable, I suppose. It's definitely a Marmite collection. But then also, I think the Tomb Raider collection was fairly Marmite for a lot of people as well. I know there are people who aren't overly keen on the 32-bit games. They don't have nostalgia for that era or interest in it. And again, that's quite understandable. We all have our own tastes. And the September carts, well, again, we had this same sort of Marmite effect with having the Bitmap Brothers Collection 2 and the Legacy of Kain collections. Pretty much a mirror of the previous 2 carts in the sense of you had a home computer cart and a 32-bit PlayStation collection. Again, same sort of thing applies to my tastes here. I was a big fan of Legacy of Kain back in the day. Really loved the games, which is why in my review video it was one of my favourite carts. Possibly won't be for everyone. And similarly, the Bitmap Brothers Collection 2, which is a collection I've been hoping for, and it's what I expected. It's definitely not going to be for everyone. The best games on it are ones that you really have to put some effort into and learn, and they're quite obtuse, and they're not very pick up and play at the best of times. So for someone like myself, it's a really good collection. For people without nostalgia, and it's going to be a tough sell. But for myself, I've been absolutely loving playing through Cadaver. I couldn't get anywhere really with it back in the day. And I've put a lot of hours into it. Some of the puzzles and things are quite, obtuse, and getting used to the controls and figuring out how the puzzles and the information work takes a little bit of doing. It's rewarding once you do, if you can be bothered. Again, mentioning the Marmite collection thing. There's a lot of carts which wouldn't be for everyone, and that's fine because not every cart needs to be for everyone. And I think it'd be boring if everything tried to be. But the November and December releases certainly helped that. Releasing 3 arcade collections after quite a long drought of arcade collections really helped, especially coming after the alpha release. And if anyone who's seen my Terraplan Arcade 3 review knows that I think it's a fantastic cart. Best of the year, second best of the year with Legacy of Kain in my opinion. Definitely very close, but also very different collections. Data East Arcade 2, I haven't done a video for this yet, I've been working on it. It's an okay collection. There's some good games in it, there's some, I have nostalgia for some of them. Very much a mixed bag, but you have the quantity to offset that. In terms of the games on them, I won't go on about Terraplan Arcade 3 because I have done a video review, but Batzagan, that's enough. Data East Arcade 2, I think my pick of the bunch at the moment is Last Mission. I've had some fun with things like Shootout and Crude Buster, although Crude Buster is quite frustratingly hard. Midnight Resistance I've had some fun with, but the controls are a bit of a pain. But again, I've got a video in the works, so there'll be more on that at some point. And the last two of the year, Tower Plan Arcade 4. I did do a preview video of it. I've played all the games on it, had some fun with it. Dog Ian and Grindstorm were both very good, and Knuckle Bash seems like it's a good bit of fun. Again, I've got a video in the works, but I'm not ready to finish it off yet, as I do like to finish every game. Now, the last cart I've also done a video of, and that's Metal Dragon and Life on Mars, the Kai Magazine software collection. And I know a lot of people are loving this, but I wasn't really overly impressed. In my opinion, it is hands down the weakest of the dual cart collections. I mean, Metal Dragon's okay, but when you've got Tower Plan 3 with things like Outzone and Fixate, it just doesn't compare to them. And then Life on Mars is pretty good. It's got some nice graphics and it's a pretty good Metroidvania, but it's nowhere in comparison to some of the other ones we've got on the Evercade. It's a pretty good cart, and I'm glad it is on the Evercade, and I would like to see more from Kai Magazine software. But I won't lie, I think it is a fairly middling cart overall. Everyone's tastes differ. If you're a bit more of a casual player, these games might be more appealing, but for me, Metal Dragon, you can finish quite quickly, or it can be challenging in places. And Life on Mars is a 2-hour game, and you probably won't come back to it. So looking at the carts released this year as a whole, I mean, it was a little bit less than last year. 2023 did have some extra carts released in it, and it might have benefited from a couple more, just on the basis that there were a few carts which are quite divisive. And as they came quite close together after a long wait, I think that made people feel a bit less interested as a whole. But production delays and things can be unavoidable, and I suppose they made the best decision they could, given that some people had ordered consoles along with the games. Releasing them earlier for others would frustrate people, so I do understand the decision. Even so, for myself, I generally liked everything. Overall, I'd say it's a fairly strong year. Just perhaps not the best. Well, definitely not the best, but the highs have been high and the lows haven't been too low for me, with my type of nostalgia and the games I like. But for all those people who think it's been a bad year because they haven't liked the computer collections, and especially if they're not into the 32-bit games as well, or don't like Tomb Raider, then I can see it having been a bad year and pretty much saved by the last few carts. So overall, I would say 2024 has been quite a solid year for Evercade, but not without its faults. The delays certainly didn't help. I think the end result, with the Alpha coming out on time, the Super Pockets coming out on time, and the last couple of carts coming out early, I think it's been pretty good, and it does seem that the Alpha has put an increase of interest in the Evercade. I've seen some videos from Japanese YouTubers who are excited about it and doing positive reviews of it, and it seems to have gone down quite well as a whole. I know some people have their issues with it, but I think it's doing enough to keep the interest in the Evercade brand and help expand the arcade lineup. The SNK deal was definitely going to help along those lines. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, I did feel that the arcade line had a limited future without getting a big publisher. I do wonder if one of the reasons we had this drought of arcade carts from last year only getting 2 and then quite a way into this year was partly because of the Alpha, or the and waiting to get the SNK deal in place, because without having too many more to pull upon, other titles and carts to release, they probably spread out the ones they had, the ones that they knew they could do, to keep it going without basically saying, the arcade line is done. So it sort of makes sense that we got the massive arcade stuff at the end of the year. They probably secured that SNK deal and thought, right, now we have the leeway to do more arcade carts. We'll release these ones we've been holding back in case we didn't get anything. But again, that's pure speculation on my part. There's no actual evidence or grounds for that beyond looking at how the releases have been and the announcement of the SNK deal. But hopefully SNK is just the beginning, and we will see, because of the Alpha and hopefully the rising profile of the Evercade, hopefully the Alpha will encourage more arcade publishers to come aboard, but I guess time will tell. Despite the bumps in the road, I think the end result is that it has been a solid year. So it's going to be interesting to see what 2025 brings. Obviously we know there's SNK, but we don't know in which shape or form that will be. So I've got some thoughts about that, and I will probably make a video about it at some point. But I figured I'd get this video wrapping up 2024 out of the way, and of course there will be full review videos of the other carts that I haven't done as yet, as well as many from the backlog which I'm still yet to get onto. Anyway, that's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.